UFC 262, Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. Welcome to another UFC prediction and analysis video. I go by the name of Harris. He goes by the name of Zan, and we are Boxing MMA Picks. Boxing MMA Picks, of course, we are here to give you fight-by-fight breakdown in the UFC, letting you know which fights are worth the money from a betting perspective, which fights you want to perhaps stay away from, perhaps underdogs that you want to take a look at. And if you stick around to the end of the video, you may even get some parlay action. UFC 262, this is a pay-per-view event. Of course, pretty good main event fight on for you guys. This one's going to be live in front of fans at the Toyota Center in Houston, Texas. So definitely interested to see how this one goes. Now we have 12 fights on this card. Pretty sure it's going to get changed around a little bit, but nonetheless, we're going to present it the way we see it for now. We have a very busy prelim as it is set at the moment with 8 fights on the prelim. So let's get right into fight number 1. We have Christos Giagos versus Sean Soriano. Important to note that Sean Soriano is taking this fight on short notice. I'll talk about Sean Soriano first. He went 0-3 in the UFC in his first stint. That was back in 2014, 2015. Taking a look at his record here, he's 14-6. In those 14 wins, 11 of them have come via finish. So 7 by KO, 4 by submission. Definitely somebody who is going to, end the fight more times than not when he does win. Admittedly, very little footage on this guy. So, to some degree, there are some question marks. But from what I saw, he looks pretty controlled in the stand-up, Muay Thai type of style, solid Thai kicks, Thai combinations, pretty quick, explosive hands coming out of him as well. Speed, accuracy, some pop on his punches and kicks. So really look for him to be, really look for his stand-up, I should say, to be a factor in this fight. When I look at Christos Giagos, on the other hand, he's coming off of a win in his last fight versus Carlton Minus. He's a switch stance fighter. His striking, somewhat basic in some ways. He'll fight from the outside. He'll circle the cage as well. Good wrestling, though. Chain wrestling, body locks, press you against the cage. Ultimately, a striker versus wrestler type of matchup. Soriano being the striker, Christos Giagos being the wrestler here. And it's going to depend on how well Soriano can defend the takedown, as is the case with most of these striker versus wrestler type of fights. Now, Drakkar Klose, of course, is a very different type of fighter, but if you watch Giagos versus Drakkar Klose, couldn't really implement his takedowns in that fight, right? It led to a loss. So I'm not going to say Christos Giagos is somebody who's a dominant wrestler per se, but he should have the wrestling advantage over most guys. Again, he did have wrestling moments in the second round of that Drakkar Klose fight, but he did look pretty gassed afterwards. So I'm curious to watch how his cardio tank is impacted here, again, especially if Sean Soriano can defend the takedown. That being said, I am going to go with the wrestler here, Christos Giagos. I think he's prepared for this. Again, I think he's had a full camp. Sean Soriano coming off of a short notice. I don't know how he's going to fare in this one, although I don't think Giagos can wrestle for 3 rounds per se. I don't think he'll need to. When you look at Soriano, the 6 losses that he has in his career, one of them is via rear naked choke, one of them is via Darce choke, one of them is via ground and pound, and then there's 2 more rear naked chokes after that. Only one of his losses are by decision. So that tells me that his game is compromised on the ground. I think Giagos is going to capitalize on that. And again, even if Giagos cannot do it for 3 rounds, I think he at least does it for 2 rounds. And I think he pulls the decision out here.
Yeah, I'll be straight. I'll be right to the point here. Christos Giagos, he's only lost to high-level fighters or fighters that are good at what they do. Jason Gonzalez back in 2012. He lost to Gilbert Burns, Chris Wade. He lost to Josh Emmett. He lost to Shamil Nikayev, he's actually 10-0 now, right? So this Nikayev guy, people haven't solved the puzzle yet. He lost to Charles Oliveira, who's fighting on the main event. Then he lost to Drakkar Klose, but he has some wins. He beat Carlton Minus, which is not a big win, but he beat Damar Hadzovic. He beat Mizuto Hirota. Now, but the way he beat these guys, and when he beat Minus and he beat Hadzovic, he implemented that heavy wrestling approach. And when you look at Sean Soriano, he historically has problems with people that can grapple, that have good wrestling. And when you look at Sean Soriano's record, his best win is against Noad Lahat. That's his best win, a former UFC fighter who went to Bellator. Well, that's really his best win. Now, I really like Giagos in this spot. Um, I just think that Soriano definitely has a striking advantage, but Giagos can hang there. And the difference on the ground, I think that's where the fight's going to play out. I think Giagos going to go for the double. Like, he can at least get 2 rounds with the wrestling. He might even go 3 rounds. Like, he's been looking pretty good with his grappling. So I like Giagos in this spot here. I think this is a fight that tailors to what he does. So I'm going to go Giagos.
All right, let's move on to fight number 2. In that case, we have Kevin Aguilar versus Tucker Lutz. I'll start this one off again as well. Looking at Kevin Aguilar, I mean, first of all, this one's a very close line in Vegas. Kevin Aguilar plus 100 as the underdog, Tucker Lutz minus 120 as the slight favorite. Taking a look at Kevin Aguilar, I mean, he lost a split decision in his last fight versus Charles Rosa. A pretty good overall fighter. I mean, he's pretty calculated on the feet. He's pretty patient, looks for the right shot. To the point of that patience, you might argue he's maybe not active enough with the hands. 3.69 significant strikes landed per minute. Not the highest work rate in terms of, a type of work rate that you would want to see in the featherweight division, but still a solid work rate nonetheless. Again, pretty patient on the feet, really looks for the right shot. He'll throw, 2 and 3 punch combinations, pretty diverse punches coming out of him as well, but really only going to offer that stand-up, right? I mean, his takedowns less than, 0.2 per fight, only 25% takedown accuracy. So really going to keep it on the feet and has some diverse striking, but again, just not active enough per se. Taking a look at Tucker Lutz on the other hand, I mean, he's in his UFC debut. So they're really giving him a lot of respect with that minus 120 favorite rating on him. 2 wins in Dana White Contender Series. Now you see his record at 11-1. His first professional fight was a loss. So he's actually on an 11-fight win streak since that first professional loss that he had. Strong wrestler type of fighter. In terms of his stand-ups, really good calf kicks, really sharp kicks in general. Some sneaky good combinations, I will say. I mean, I don't think he gets a lot of respect on the feet per se, but I think he has some sneaky good combinations, and I think that's going to, really play a role in this fight, especially with Kevin Aguilar, who's going to want to keep it standing as well. Again, I make comparisons in terms of how fights may go, even though I'm not comparing the fighter. I'm not comparing Tucker Lutz to Dan Ige, but when I watched that Kevin Aguilar versus Dan Ige fight, in some ways, I think it could be a blueprint of what we can expect in this one. Although Tucker Lutz may not be as capable as on the feet as Dan Ige was, I think Lutz will be able to use that wrestling in the way that Dan Ige did. Kevin Aguilar, he is tough though. He is game. He 3-fight losing streak, so he was 17-1 at one point. But I think Tucker Lutz just maybe has a little bit more to offer. I think on the feet, if Aguilar is better, it's not by a huge margin. And I think even despite the takedown defense that Aguilar has, I think Lutz has an advantage with the wrestling, and I think he'll use it. Potentially a close fight, or potentially one where Tucker Lutz, kind of after that first half in the first round, starts to cruise to victory here. So my pick is going to be Tucker Lutz on this one. Close fight, but I'm going with the slight favorite.
Yeah, this is a hard fight because when you look at Kevin Aguilar, he's a typical sprawl and brawl. He wants to sprawl and keep this on the feet. He wants to bang. He wants to throw hands here, and he has good stand-up. He has good boxing, effective boxing. He let me down though in his last fight. I didn't expect him to beat Dan Ige. I didn't expect him to beat Zabira Tukugov. But Charles Rosa, I expected him to beat that guy. And Charles Rosa was kind of styling on the feet. So I'm kind of concerned. Like, I'm not sure where Aguilar is at mentally here. The way Charles Rosa was able to outstrike him ultimately in that fight. He's going to be fighting Tucker Lutz. Tucker Lutz, though, is a concern. He hasn't fought anybody. His record is, his best win is Sherrard Blackledge on the Contender Series. Blackledge is a guy that could have a good future But he's only 5-0. And then before that is Chase Gibson, 9-4. Then he fought a 2-2, 6-3, 8-11, 3-14. So you get what I'm saying? He hasn't fought anyone here where Aguilar is a huge step up, but stylistically, this fight favors Tucker Lutz. Stylistically, he's a strong guy. Like he's thick, he's built. He has good wrestling. He has a wrestling background, and that's where you can get Aguilar. That's where you can kind of drag him out. And on the Contender Series, from one fight to the other, from the Chase Gibson fight to the Blackledge fight, his striking improved, and that was those fights were 3 months apart. So, like, I saw visual improvement in that Blackledge fight from the Chase Gibson in terms of the striking, because Blackledge, a lot of people thought he was going to win that fight. So, I think Tucker Lutz, even though he hasn't fought in the competition, I guess that's not really his fault, but now he's stepping up. I think stylistically, this is a match he could win. And Aguilar is fading a bit. I'm not sure where he's at. Like, if this was Aguilar a year and a half ago, I'm going to Aguilar all day. Next week, next month, I'm going on like every day of the week. But Aguilar today hasn't really shown me improvements. He's actually shown me that he's receding. And I think this is a spot that Lutz can utilize that wrestling you talked about. And even the stand-up, he can hold his own there. So I like Tucker Lutz here. I think Tucker Lutz, I think stylistically this is a good fight for him. So I'm going to go Tucker Lutz.
Sounds good. So we are in agreement there. In that case, let's move on to the next fight. We have Gina Mazany. Fight number 3, of course, Gina Mazany versus Priscila Cachoeira. I will take this one off as well. Now, typically when we see a Gina Mazany fight, you get a little nervous, not really a fight that you even really want to make a pick on, because in some ways, respectably, of course, they are typically lower level fights. This one, on the other hand, a little bit of a higher level fight in general, based on what we've seen Gina Mazany look like in her last fight. I actually feel decent about her in this one. I see her. She is the big favorite at -210. I'm not liking those odds for a Gina Mazany caliber fighter kind of ever, so I don't actually make the bet on this one. But if I'm breaking down these fighters, I mean, again, Gina Mazany is coming off of a win in her last fight, claims to be a boxer. I'm not going to say her boxing is the best, but it is viable for the division. Her stand-up is okay as a southpaw, pretty active hands, pretty active jab. She will mix up the striking as well. I think what I like most about Gina Mazany at this point, at least again, based on her last fight, she looks physically strong in this 125-pound division, has that sort of shredded, ripped body, looks physically strong for the division. And we know she's going to use that physique to her advantage because she does have some wrestling, right? She started training with James Krause in her last fight, and she showed it. She got good underhooks, good takedown attempts. She'll body lock, she'll chain wrestle, pretty good top control as well. Again, just using that sort of physical stature and physical frame of hers. When I look at Priscila Cachoeira, on the other hand, she won her last fight. I mean, she's a pressuring brawler style of fighter, very heavy hands. Gonna really start throwing heavy hands. She's gonna stay right in front of you. She trains with Jessica Andrade. That's kind of all you need to know in terms of her hands. Similar brawling style in some ways, of course, minus the wrestling, in my opinion. Now, for as much as I don't think Gina Mazany is a high level fighter, I do have to acknowledge her improvements. I think she has improved, quite considerably, fight over fight. She does get better in every fight. She looked good in her last fight, and I do expect her to pull this one out, especially because Priscila Cachoeira, she slows down as the fight goes on, especially with the pace that I anticipate Mazany applying here. Again, I anticipate Mazany using a lot of jabs, really throwing her rhythm off, not allowing her to kind of look for that big strike that she's used to throwing. And I think Mazany's going to kind of mix in that wrestling, that clinching, kind of make it dirty, gas her out a bit, and kind of just win the war of attrition on this one. So Gina Mazany is my pick. I will warn, those odds are a little steep in my opinion, but I think she has the tools to get this one done here.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Gina Mazany is one of the bigger favorites on this card. Priscila Cachoeira, Cachoeira, however you say it, she's wild, man. She can land. This is a hard fight to pick because if Priscilla comes out and she's accurate, Mazany's in trouble because I believe Priscilla is a longer fighter. She has the power, and I think she has the speed as well in this fight. But I think as the fight draws out, the fight favors Gina Mazany. So in a female fight flyweight division, there's not many knockouts. So you got to think the fight's going to drag out a bit. So in that sense, I'm going to go with Mazany, but I'm not confident at all. I think that Mazany is very low level. I think she's very beatable, and I think Priscilla has a path here to win this fight. But I'm going to go Mazany, hoping that this fight drags out. She can get this to the ground, use her wrestling. And if she's able to get this to the ground, if she can get that first takedown in the first round pretty easy, I think it's going to be an easy win for Mazany, right? So I'm going to go Mazany, thinking that grappling advantage is going to be the decider here. So Mazany is my pick.
Zani is the pick, but similar to how we have heavyweight beware, I think respectively speaking, this could be a low-level fight aware. Don't necessarily add this to your parlays, but again, Gina Mazany should get it done. Let's move on to fight number 4. Last fight of the early prelims, at least so far, before we anticipate them changing the schedule. We have Jordan Wright versus Jamie Pickett. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, this is a tricky fight because we got two guys that are really untested in their whole career. When Jordan Wright stepped up on the Contender Series, he fought Anthony Hernandez. He got destroyed in 40 seconds. Joachim Buckley, but Joachim Buckley's explosive. He got him. This is a hard fight because when you look at the way they fight, Jordan Wright has that karate stance, that karate kind of point fighting. While Jamie Pickett is not necessarily good anywhere, but in this fight, he's going to be the much stronger guy. I think he has the grappling advantage in this fight. Can he use it? I'm not sure. But I believe he has the speed. I believe he has the power advantage in this fight. So I like Jamie Pickett here, the athleticism here. I'm not high on Jordan Wright. I think that if Pickett can land, he can actually put him out. I think Jordan Wright has a suspect chin here. And we've seen Jamie Pickett go 3 rounds with Tefan Nchukwi, and we saw him go 3 rounds with one of the most powerful guys, Punahele Soriano, right? So he could take a shot, right? So I'm gonna go with Jamie Pickett because remember these guys are middleweight, so they're gonna be throwing heavy shots at each other, and I'm gonna go with the more durable guy, the faster guy that I think is faster, and the guy that I think is the stronger guy in the ring. So I'm going to go Jamie Pickett to win this fight.
Yeah, I'll keep it short on my end just to echo some of the sentiments you made when I was looking at these guys. I also felt that Pickett was the quicker of the two. I thought that would play a factor as well. I also felt like, Jordan Wright has a suspect chin. And one thing I also don't like about Wright is when he gets hit, he shows it. He shows that he's hurt, doesn't really have that poker face to kind of keep the fight going. It really alters how he moves and how he fights going forward. And again, Pickett with the speed advantage, these guys are both going to be throwing their respective strikes, whether it's kicks or punches. I think Pickett could and probably should be able to land on Wright. But again, this is kind of a beware because both guys are completely untested. It's a coin flip in some ways because you can't rely on either fighter. But again, to your point, I think I think Jamie Pickett has sort of the wrestling advantage, the ground game advantage, the clinch advantage. I think he has the quickness advantage. I think he has the athleticism advantage. Although untested, I think this is a fight that Jamie Pickett should feel relatively comfortable about, and we'll see if he gets it done. This is a pick'em, -110 each. We're both picking Jamie Pickett on this one. So why don't we move on to fight number 5? This is going to be a good Muay Thai one here. Andrea Lee versus Antonina Shevchenko. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, this is a good one. We know Shevchenko, sister of the champ. She knows she's a kickboxer, so she should have the striking advantage in this fight. She should be able to utilize the range and have the more precise, accurate shots here. Andrea Lee kind of marches down. She kind of likes to hold center. I don't know. She's on a 3-fight losing streak. This is a tough one, right? So Shevchenko's supposed to win this fight. She's 9-2. Andrea Lee 11-5. I'm actually going Andrea Lee here. I think Andrea Lee. I think she's going to utilize a lot of grappling, and I think that she could get Shevchenko to the ground. I know Shevchenko's improving with her grappling, where she caught someone by surprise. Who was that again? Lucy Pudilova. She caught her with that submission. But now everyone's aware of Shevchenko's improvements in the jiu-jitsu, right? So I think Andrea Lee's going to be smart here and just keep getting us to the ground. I think she's going to be able to get the takedowns. I've seen some fights with Andrea Lee where she's been able to get takedowns on fighters that have better takedown defense. And I think that's going to be her game plan, is get Shevchenko to the mat. So I'm going to go, I think she's the underdog. I'm going to go Andrea Lee.
She is, in fact, the underdog, to your point, with the takedown being a potential path here. Antonina Shevchenko has 56% takedown defense, so not necessarily the best on paper, again, despite her improving ground game. So let's see if that's a factor in this fight. When I took a look at this fight, I mean, again, Andrea Lee, she is on that 3-fight losing streak, as you mentioned. 2 of those were by split decisions. Thai style of fighter, a lot of head movement, leading into combinations with hands and feet. Uses that jab quite consistently. Gets into a lot of striking exchanges, though. That's something that I noticed from her, is that she really enjoys the striking, right? I mean, she has that wrestling knowledge and the ground knowledge to your point. But even when we look at her stats, about 1.5 takedowns per fight, whereas she's landing at a clip of over 5.5 significant strikes per minute. So definitely falls in love with that stand-up. Antonina, on the other hand, again, obviously she's no Valentina, but there are a lot of things to like about her. She's a southpaw, for one. Again, has that Muay Thai stance. I mean, you see how Valentina looks in the ring. Antonina kind of looks the same way in terms of their fighting stance. Very technically sound. And again, that improving ground game is going to be something that really could determine how this fight goes. Personally, I actually do think it stays on the feet. I think Andrea Lee, especially with the fans in the crowd, I think this is going to turn into a striking match, and I don't think she's going to implement what would be the smarter game plan. I almost don't trust the IQ from that perspective. Now, in some ways, again, going to be a war of attrition. Who wants it more? Who continues to land more as each person is landing on each other? I feel Antonina has not necessarily a clinch advantage, but I feel like she can really use that tie clinch, especially, to really mix it up. For control reasons, possibly winning the points on the cage. I also feel like Antonina maybe is a little bit quicker, a little bit sharper, a little bit more technical on the feet. And I think, I mean, we always have to consider the X factor of who do we think the UFC wants to win. And I think they want Antonina Shevchenko to win for very obvious family purposes. So I actually do factor that in when making a decision here. I feel like they gave Antonina, not to say a winnable fight, but a fight where she doesn't have a huge disadvantage against a fighter. And I think as a result, we're going to see a pretty sharp and a pretty improved performance again by Antonina Shevchenko. She's coming off of a very impressive win versus Ariane Lipski in a fight where I thought Lipski would win. I think she's going to have another great performance here and get it done against Andrea Lee. I think she's just going to slightly outstrike her and perhaps win a pretty close fight. So I'm going on the other side of the coin here. I'm going Antonina Shevchenko by a close decision. Let's move on to fight number 6. In that case, we have Lando Vannata versus Mike Grundy. Mike Grundy, tough fighter. I mean, pretty big for the 145 division. Interesting to note, though, Lando V is coming down from 155, and he has considered coming down to 145 before. So it's not to say he's the biggest 155er coming down, but important to note that because, again, Grundy is a pretty big 145er. Let's see how that fares against somebody who was competing at 155. Looking at Mike Grundy's stand-up, I mean, it's okay. Definitely has some pop, but he is primarily a wrestler, good takedowns, pretty strong on top, has that Greco-Roman style of wrestling, so it's pretty effective. even if you remember his loss versus Movsar Evloev, he took Evloev down in that first round. I mean, he had I'm not going to say a fight finishing Darce choke there, but some other fighters who maybe weren't as adept on the ground as Evloev was may have been caught by that Darce choke. So Grundy definitely knows what he's doing down there, and can definitely implement that. Looking at Lando Vannata, I mean, we kind of know the type of fighter that he is. Very experienced fighter in some ways, even though you still kind of remember he's still only 29 years old. I mean, you feel like he's been around for quite some time. Pretty smooth style of stand up. He has that switch stance style that he's been showing lately. Real good rhythm and timing, very light on his feet, good calf kick. He is one of those fighters though that kind of they kind of admire their own shots. They kind of throw one shot at a time, but he does have fairly quick hands to make up for that. Fights with his hands down, so he relies on that reaction time. He relies on those counter punches, but he does slow down a bit as the fight goes on, and that's something that could potentially be concerning because I do feel Grundy kind of slows down as well. But again, in some ways, you have another striker versus wrestler type of matchup. But we do know Lando Vannata has some wrestling. He did wrestle in college, but I don't think it's to the level of Mike Grundy at all. So I will still call this a striker versus wrestler type of matchup. And Lando V, I mean, he technically has the better skill set, right? I mean, he has some wrestling, he has the better striking for sure. But I do think Mike Grundy, I think his grit, I think that wrestling, that Greco-Roman style of wrestling, I think it could be the difference here. I think that they do both gas out, so it's almost really up to who wins the first two rounds. I think Grundy has the opportunity to pull that off, especially if he lands that first takedown with relative ease. So again, this one's a tough one. I'm staying all the way away from this one from a betting perspective, but from a pick perspective, I'm going with Mike Grundy.
Okay. Yeah, this I don't think it's that hard. I think this is an easy pick here. I think when you look at the fighters here, Vannata, like he got taken down 3 times by Bobby Green, 4 times by Mark Diakiese. He's not going to be able to do anything against these takedown attempts by Grundy. So I'm going to be quick. I like Mike Grundy here. I think he's going to get it done. I think he's going to overpower Vannata. I think he's going to take him down as he wants, and I think he's gonna be prepared to go 3 rounds. I think he's going to be ready to just know that he's going to have to. He's in a wrestling match this fight. So, and I feel he's going to win this fight decisively, unanimous 3 rounds. So yeah, Mike Grundy's my pick here, and I'm pretty confident he gets this done.
All right, sounds good. Let's move on to fight number 7 in that case. This is probably the fight that I'm looking the most forward to on the prelims. We have a couple of 125ers here, Matt Schnell versus Rogério Bontorin. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I think this is one of the hardest fights to pick here because when you look at Bontorin, he can utilize his jiu-jitsu, his wrestling, his grappling. He can get this to the ground. He has power as well. Schnell has chin issues that he can definitely get hit, right? So Bontorin can definitely put Schnell out with the power. But I got to think as the fight goes on, I got to believe that Schnell has the better gas tank. Bontorin tends to fade. His last fight against Car France, he was fading at the end of that first round, right? So, but he has such a big advantage in the grappling that I'm really concerned here as far as Matt Schnell's my pick, but I'm really concerned because he has such a big advantage in the grappling. Snell's no slouch in the grappling as well. He can definitely hold his own. I just think that Bontorin has that top pressure, that grappling, that he has the takedowns in this fight. But I know he can't do that for 3 rounds. So I'm just banking on Schnell surviving, even winning the first round, but just staying around for the second, third. I believe he's going to pick it up, win the second, third round. So Schnell's my pick there.
Yeah, I think Matt Schnell has the grappling IQ to not get caught by anything where he's lazy or where he misses a beat. It's really going to rely on Rogério Bontorin making the right move to put him out early in the fight with some kind of submission attempt, let's say, right? But to your point, as this fight goes on, Bontorin, he doesn't have that cardio tank. Matt Schnell, he does, especially lately. Schnell has really been showing a methodical pace in the stand-up. He kind of, I almost want to say he almost lulls you to sleep, and then he kind of just comes out of nowhere with his strikes. Pretty quick hands, pretty accurate hands, really good combinations as well, especially in those counter situations. Very efficient striker, like I mentioned. He doesn't really waste anything. He doesn't throw wildly. Pretty efficient with his strikes and his movement, and just good movement in the ring in general, right? I like his striking defense along with that from a striking perspective. And in terms of his takedowns, I mean, he doesn't have the most impressive stats, but he can take guys down. He can grapple. He has a few triangle finishes in his career. That might not be a great thing because, of course, it signifies having comfort on your back, and that's not where he's going to want to be on this fight. But he does have that knowledge on the ground, right? I mean, if you look at his loss versus Pantoja was on top. And this is something that I noticed that was interesting. I'm not comparing Pantoja to Bontorin in terms of the grappling necessarily, but Pantoja was on top and chose to stand up rather than engage in grappling. I don't know if that was Pantoja just falling in love with the striking, or I don't know if there was some kind of read that he had on Schnell where he didn't want it down there. So that could be a sign in this one. I don't know if it will be, but that was something that was very interesting to note in Matt Schnell's last fight. Looking at Bontorin, I mean, he's coming off of a 2-fight losing streak. He just got knocked out 2 months ago versus Kai Kara France. He did look good in that fight, though, up until the KO. So we know Bontorin definitely belongs on this level. Decent boxing in his own right. Has good speed, has that pop, as you mentioned, big puncher, opportunistic puncher. He's gonna wait for that counter strike opportunity. But I have seen guys outstrike him. He doesn't have the highest striking pace at just over 2 significant strikes landed per minute. Again, to the point of being a counterpuncher. Good, strong clinch, though, right? We saw that in the Ray Borg fight. He's physically strong, and I think that's where Matt Schnell could be in trouble early in this fight. But I think, like you said, I mean, Schnell, I'm going to depend on his cardio tank. I'm going to depend on his technical striking. And I'm going to depend on his ground IQ. Not to say he'll be in advantageous situations there, but I think early in the fight, that IQ that he has on the ground will more than likely keep him safe. And then I'm looking for him in rounds 2 and round 3 to really start picking apart Bontorin on the feet. Maybe not picking him apart, but definitely showing a more active style of stand-up. I think because of that, we're looking at a 29-28, potentially even a 30-27 if he pulls out that first round as well. And for some reason in my gut, I actually feel really good about Matt Schnell in this position. I know the risks that Bontorin has to provide, but in my gut, I feel pretty good about Matt Schnell here. I actually
I don't. Hold on.
go
Sorry,
ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead.
I don't at all. I think Matt Schnell's lights can get lit out one shot. Like that's the type of fight I think this is. So I hear you though. I'm going Matt Schnell, but I think Bontorin can knock him out cold. I
I don't
think he
know.
has it.
I
I
don't
think he
know.
has
I
it.
don't know. I mean, he can. He definitely can. He definitely can. Let's not ignore that. He definitely can get that done. I just don't see that happening. I like what Matt Schnell has to offer on the feet, and again, I think he really learned from that last loss that he had against Pantoja, where he was a little too trigger happy, and then he got clipped. I think he really learned from that fight. He almost needed that fight. I don't see the same happening with Bontorin, but it could, right? It could. Matt Schnell is my pick. Let's move on to the final fight of the prelims. In that case, we have Cachoeira Souza versus Andre Muniz. I'll be honest, I thought Cachoeira retired. I did. I thought he retired. It was only 5 months ago, of course, where he was brutally knocked out by Kevin Holland. In terms of who Cachoeira is as a fighter, I mean, in that Holland fight, at least up until the point of KO, his movement still looked decent. I mean, he was still, he was able to catch that sharp kick that was coming from Holland. He was able to scramble. He was able to defend the activity of Holland off the back. He was able to improve his position to side control the back, clinch effectively, take him down. So by no means is he done from a skill set perspective. We know in general he's going to be the type of fighter that throws a lot of feints, shoots for takedowns, willing to clinch against the cage and really use those advantages that he has there. When I'm looking at Andre Muniz, on the other hand, I mean, he's 10 years younger. He's 31 years old. Usually 31 is kind of your athletic prime in this sport. So that's going to be potentially a factor here. He's on a 6-fight winning streak. Definitely a lot of motivation on his end to protect that. He's a grappler in a lot of ways. So of the 20 wins that he has, 13 of them are by submission. When I look at his repertoire on the feet, he's a southpaw, pretty bouncy in the stand-up, pretty long jab. He'll throw those kicks. He'll use his length. He'll use his reach. Has a 6-inch reach advantage in this one, same height. He'll definitely use that reach to his advantage. He's big. He's physically strong. This one's tough. I mean, this is very tough. And I think the odds indicate that. It is a coin flip. It is a -110 pick'em for each one. I do think that age and the reach could be a factor in this fight. It's grappler versus grappler in some ways. But I will say at this point in their respective careers, I do like what Andre Muniz has to offer a little bit more. I think he's going to be the hungrier fighter. I think he's going to have a little bit more on the feet to offer. And I'm not going to say he's going to be the better grappler, but hey, you never really know what could happen on there. So Andre Muniz is going to be my pick. But again, from a real betting perspective, I stay all the way away from this one.
Yeah, this is me, two phenoms, two jiu-jitsu phenoms. Like Cachoeira, before UFC, people got to remember Cachoeira was he was like fighting in the ADCC. He was in championships. He's won tournaments. He's won he's the if you actually ask the jiu-jitsu community, top 15 jiu-jitsu guys of all time, no gi or gi, he's gonna be up there in the top 15 of all time. He's that good. And now he's fighting Muniz, where his way to win is fighting these fake black belts, and then he submits them. And he submits all these so-called black belts, these American black belts, like Taylor Johnson, Bartosz Fabinski. You know what I'm saying? So he's going to be fighting a guy that all those jiu-jitsu tricks I don't think are going to work here. I think that when it comes to the stand-up, I think Ronaldo's Cachoeira is a way better striker than Muniz. And Cachoeira actually has power to put you down as well. Man, I like Cachoeira in this spot. I think Cachoeira is going to turn back time. I think the UFC wants to give him a win here, so they gave him someone that is mainly jiu-jitsu, and that's his game. Cachoeira already rounded out that aspect of learning the striking. Muniz hasn't done that yet. He's still relying on fighting off his back, or he's relying on jiu-jitsu. So I'm going to go Cachoeira here. Is it the underdog? I'm not sure.
Slight favorite, depending on which book you're looking at, but he was as high as -125 at one point.
Okay. I'm going to go Cachoeira. I think the UFC is feeding him a guy that he should be. But yeah, I get it. His age and that's obviously a concern. But I think Cachoeira is just strong. He's a strong guy. He should hold his own in the grappling, or even win the grappling. And I believe he definitely has the striking advantage and the power. So yeah, Cachoeira is my pick.
And you know what? I mean, those are very legitimate reasons to like Cachoeira in this fight, right? I mean, matchup-wise, it kind of works in his favor. I can't trust the 41-year-old age, but I mean, again, if we're breaking this down from an analysis perspective, I can absolutely see why you would go with Cachoeira on this fight. So, coin flip in some ways. I'm going to go with the less experienced guy. You're going to go with the guy that has the technical advantages in this fight. Not mad at that at all. Why don't we round off the prelims by taking it to Vegas, taking a look at what this card has to offer. Very tricky card, I will say. Who would you say is perhaps the underdog that you feel is most able to win their fight on the prelims?
Okay, underdog-wise, I think Andrea Lee. I like Andrea Lee. Jamie Pickett. Yeah. Actually, you know what? Put me down for Jamie Pickett.
Jamie Pickett. Okay, so Jamie Pickett, again, that is a pick'em, so we do consider that an underdog pick. So Jamie Pickett is going to be your underdog of the prelims. My underdog of the prelims, this is going to sound funny. but I'm going with Andre Muniz. I'm really, I don't know. I think that knockout might have done something to Souza, and I don't think it's wake him up, not at this age. So I'm going Andre Muniz plus 100. I probably don't actually throw any money on that, but in terms of underdog, I feel has the best opportunity to win on the prelim card. I do think it's Andre Muniz. And then in terms of one or two favorite fights that you like, which ones are you taking a look at?
All right, I like Mike Grundy.
All right.
Yeah, I'll just stick there. Mike Grundy.
Mike Grundy minus 125, not even bad as a straight up bet there, especially for the wrestling advantages that he will have in that Lando Vannata fight. Not mad at that pick at all. I think I have a couple of picks here, and there are a couple of gut checks. I'm going with Tucker Lutz. Again, I think Kevin Aguilar, that Charles Rosa fight really turned me off in terms of his ability, like to say he's still rising. I know he's only 32 years old. I know he still has a lot to prove. 17-4. He was 17-1 at one point. But again, that Charles Rosa fight really disappointed me. And I like the advantages that Tucker Lutz should have in this fight. So that's a bit of a gut check there. And then I'm also going to add on to that. Let's see here. Again, another sort of gut pick here, but I'm going with, where is that fight? Matt Schnell. I might even make a two-fight parlay, a two-fight prelim parlay. This is something that I'm seriously considering for this card. Both fights, Tucker Lutz and Matt Schnell, would be a plus 185. $100 will return 285 for our bigger bettors. $250 will return 714. Again, I do understand the risks in both of those fights, but I do expect both the guys to get it done. So why don't we leave it off there? UFC 262, Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. This has been the prelim card predictions by Boxing MMA Picks. Again, he goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris. And at Boxing MMA Picks, we would definitely appreciate if you did all that algorithmic stuff, like the page, subscribe to the channel, share with anyone that you know that needs any kind of UFC breakdown and UFC analysis on a fight-by-fight basis. Again, all that algorithmic stuff, we would greatly appreciate it. Up next, main card predictions. UFC 262, Oliveira versus Chandler. Let's get this money.
Let's do it.